I'm Jeff Kay, founder of My Digital Memories. We preserve, protect, and organize your precious memories, which include your photographs, negatives, videotapes, home movies, records, and cassette tapes. These can be stored for today and future generations. After our parents died, my sister and I were cleaning out their home and we came across boxes of photos that we wanted and our kids wanted. I knew I had to digitize all these paper photographs, slides, and negatives so they could be shared with family and friends. In My Digital Memories, we take your photos and most types of media and digitize them. We're able to restore photographs and remove unwanted scratches or blemishes. We also digitize home movies. We deliver the end product into any type of storage imaginable, whether it's on a USB thumb drive, a DVD, or storage in the cloud. We make it easier for you to share your digital memories with family and friends. Were you aware your family memories, paper photographs, and other media were only designed to last a maximum of 20 years in a climate-controlled environment? People care about their memories, genealogy, and where they come from. My client Sally gave me countless VHS tapes and had no idea of the treasure she was about to find. She heard her father's voice for the first time. Her father died in Vietnam and she never met him. She broke down in tears and was extremely grateful. Let's always remember our pets, our furry friends who are loyal to the end. Please contact me to preserve what is most valuable in your life for today and future generations. You are never forgotten with My Digital Memories. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. How are
Well,
you?
I appreciate everybody, my podcast family, joining us. I'd like to introduce Jenny Lee. She's a life coach who focuses on building resilience by creating joyful morning routines. Morning routines is a time for self-love, healing, nervousness.
Healing the nervous system.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And Jenny, I'll let you take care of that. And just a brief overview of what you'll be talking about. So take it away.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about a part of my history, I suppose, regarding ancestors and the lessons that we've learned throughout. Am I correct? But if you wanted to know more about my work, that is.
Yeah, let's start with Let's start with what you do, and
Okay.
and let's get into your grandfather's memories or
Okay,
things
what I
of
do.
that nature.
Okay, sure. We could start with what I do. So in addition to me being a teacher, it's been about 20, 21, 22 years. It's been a while. And just a couple of years ago, I started coaching people on how to make morning routines easier. And then it kind of evolved into the bigger picture that is to expand happiness, really, because when you want to, whenever you decide to be whatever personality that you want to become, It's really important to do that early in the morning because that's when your brain is the most malleable, it's the most impressionable. And so, whatever you think about when it's positive thoughts, then those are the seeds that grow throughout the day. And yeah, and that's why the morning routines, because the morning routines is also an opportunity for you to choose the kind of fun and joy that you want to bring to yourself. And when you choose something that brings you the most exhilaration, like for me, it's dancing, for some people, maybe yoga or going outside, it gives them the most joy, it gives them all the happiness, and that's the tone of their day.
Now, I've got a question real quick. Sorry for interrupting. Now, is there a particular time of morning that this should be done?
Well, when you wake up in the I guess at any time because everybody has different schedule, right? For me, I would wake up at 5 because I start my day at 7. So I leave work at 7 and I have to be at school by 7:20, 7:30. So, but I really don't suggest anybody to start, especially if you identify as, oh, I'm not a morning person, don't wake up 2 hours earlier. Start easy, start from 10 minutes. And within the 10 minutes, find something that you find the most fun that you could do. Say you want to dance for 10 minutes, or you want to go out for a walk for 10 minutes. That's good too. Or you want to, exercise, like, with Peloton for a little bit, right? Whatever rings your bell. But start easy and make sure that it's fun and simple. And then when you find that you really like it, when you find that you are actually looking forward to it, maybe you can add 5 more minutes after a couple of weeks. So it's really important to be kind and be gentle with your body and your mind in the process. And then for me, it took about maybe a year, from for 10 minutes to evolve to 2 hours because I added more things, right? I just kind of changed things up a little bit. So at first, okay, I was just focusing on dancing, and then I started adding things like, oh, I want to add some more challenge, maybe some challenging yoga poses, and then meditation and breath work, ice cold shower. And so that's how it kind of expanded to 2 hours. But it all started simple and easy and fun. When you want to start a new habit, you need to make it easy for your body and your mind so that there's no shock to the system, and you would keep on gravitating of adding more because you're having fun. Then you would actually wake up to something that you appreciate, that you're eager to wake up to in the morning. So that's my method.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And that is something that I practice in the morning. So to set my day.
Perfect.
For those of you who are interested in learning more, please contact Jenny. Her information is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. So with that being said, Jenny, tell us about your grandfather. I thought that was such an inspirational story, and I wanted to share it with our viewers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I heard a lot about my grandfather growing up. With my mother, it started with him having the hardest time in China, and he was very young. My mom told me that he lost all of his family. He probably had a sister or two and both of his parents, and they died from malnourishment because I guess there's always been famine at that point in China where he was growing up in the south of China. Exactly.
Sorry, what year is this?
This was probably in the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. Or early 1900s. And then because of that, he had no choice but to leave And my mother told me that he had an uncle who just decided to leave mainland China somewhere else, anywhere but there for a better opportunity. So they sailed to Indonesia and they landed in northern Sumatra. Then that's how they started their lives, by maybe picking up, odds and ends, doing little jobs here and there, and start building business. And my grandfather at that time, I was told that he was about 10 years old. And yeah, I could just imagine that in order for him to get, to survive, he would have to work as a child labor. And maybe then, that's how he started collecting money. And at some point in his early adulthood, maybe he started building his business. And after so many years, he became a successful businessman
What did he
in
do?
northern Sumatra. He built an alcohol business. So he was selling liquors and I guess all kinds of alcohol. And Indonesia, I could imagine that must have been tricky, because they're a very conservative society over there, and with the Muslims, I wonder, if he had to deal with the community that's mostly Muslims, and alcohol is probably illegal over there. So yeah, but he still became successful. And my mother told me that when automobile first came out, he was the man who first brought automobile into the town. Wow. So like that was a big deal. And so I guess he became a prominent figure in the community. And then after a while, probably like I'm not sure how long it took him to, then he decided, because he became successful and now it's time to build a family. And so he hired a matchmaker. That's how he met my grandmother. It was an interesting way of meeting someone, like, at that point. I think I was told he was probably just handed, the stack of pictures, and he was like, oh, not this one, not this one, not this one, and oh, I like this one. And then
kind of like a 1920s dating service.
Yeah. Right. And now
matchmaker.com in the 20s.
That's the technology, exactly. And so this woman that he liked, and I think the matchmaker talked to her family, and she happened to be from Shanghai, and all the dowry was negotiated and everything. And so she was shipped from Shanghai to northern Sumatra, Indonesia, never to see her family again. Then she married my grandfather. They probably didn't see each other until their wedding day.
Sounds like a true mail order bride.
Interesting, right? But that's what I heard about the Chinese tradition, is that marriage is really about unions of families, and it's all about I guess like convenience of expanding certain family or maintaining the power structure of families and wealth and all of that. And so children, just don't really have the choice of marrying for love most of the time. It was like that. So yeah, they got married, and she bore him 17 children, and my mother is child number 15.
I'm sorry, did you say 17?
Yes.
Wow.
It's
a big family.
It's a big family. So I have cousins that I've never met before. That I do. There's probably more than I figured, but it's life is so full of surprises because of that.
I'm sure your genealogy tree is interesting.
I bet. Yeah, I'm sure it is interesting. And my mother was speculating. There were talks of my grandfather probably had some Mongolian blood in him because he was taller than most people. But I actually went to 23andMe to get my genes and all that evaluated, but it's really all probably like 90% of Southern China and 6% Vietnamese, which is interesting. Like I didn't know I had anything, any percentage of. I didn't know that I had an association with with the Vietnamese, and then interestingly, 1% Native American. I don't know how that came from. It's like, but hey, you'll never know. Mm-hmm.
So I do have a couple questions. So
Yeah.
how how has your grandfather's story influenced your perspective on perseverance and success?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that question. That's really um, that requires me to go a little deeper, right? Um, I could imagine that the time that he was living, it was there was none of the technology that we have now. um, any kinds of entertainment, and their entertainment was, everything that's just like really traditional, I'm sure, and everything that they did in order to achieve something, it was just like purely effort and manual. I mean, it's like for me at this point, it's really hard to even imagine, right? Cooking from scratch with everything, and the sense of survival that is probably dominant at that point. And being a child in a strange country, in a new environment, with no parents. But in his way, he managed to survive and build a business and thrive and build a life for his next generations. And so I was just thinking, right? I mean, we could go back to, okay, when I was growing up and when I complained, I would be told, "You have it easy," right? My mom would tell me. But then I also had a traumatic childhood and teenagehood and adulthood, and some of that, trauma and energy kind of stuck with me. Because yeah, for many years I lived in trauma response but then going back to what my mom said about me having it easy, or my father would say the same thing, I wouldn't be here if my grandfather hadn't survived and then worked and fought his tooth and nails to build something, right, for himself that that sustained him, that gave him life so that he could give that life to the following generation. And the following generation, I could imagine, the way that they were raised. And my mom did tell me, they were raised with a lot of discipline, with a lot of, I guess, punishment too, right? In order for them to continue the tradition, especially with my grandfather, he felt like because he survived, now it was his obligation to continue the tradition of his family, of his identity of being Chinese in Indonesia, which that time was really discriminatory against the Chinese. So there were actually quite a few. There's a few events in the history when there was like unrests and killings targeting the Chinese. And so even, among in the middle of all that chaos and discrimination, he still made it. Right. And then, but then he wanted to maintain that tradition and pass it on to the children. And in order for the children to say, have respect and, being able to maybe continue his business and continue to live in a prosperous way, he had his ways of, let's say, educating, the next generation, probably in a tough way, right? And so I think my mother's generation grew up, a little more comfortable than my grandfather did, but it was still harder than how I grew up, right? But then I feel that I now live a life that was manifested, that was imagined by my ancestors, that was imagined by my grandfather, right? And then the generation before me, that was, they were living a better life that my grandfather wanted for them. And then now here I am, right? I live in a country where I am free to be myself, where I have all kinds of opportunities, and I'm living a life that my parents imagined for me. And so when you talk about perseverance, I guess in life, like even when life started, there's always all kinds of, stumbling and discomfort, and all that is the process of growth, right? And that could also include all kinds of abuse and discrimination, and whatever life throws at you. But then if we could either see it, and I'm sure that's what my grandfather had to deal with too, and probably is so much worse than what my parents went through, what I went through, right? Because imagine this is like in the 20s, in the 30s and 40s, and there were wars and all kinds of political chaos that time. But he made it and he managed to give us life, right? And without and so we could either see it as a way of all kinds of chaos and suffering. It's I feel that it's a push, it's a force, it's an energy to push us in a new direction of thriving. Because when you're experiencing suffering, the question should be, all right, what lesson can I learn from this? When I come out of the suffering, what can I be? Or, you could, stay in the victim mode. Oh, like, life is hard and, people keep doing this to me and I feel so discriminated against. And what can I do? All my choices. But no, you always have choices. Right? You can always choose to go to a new direction and start rebuilding something for yourself that is more authentically you. And nothing is really permanent, right? Maybe it's very fleeting. Maybe at some point the same thing happens again and you would have to move to another place and you would have to rebuild. But that's life, right? It's the constant evolution, the constant growth. And that's how I feel what's going on after one generation, my grandfather's, and, how he was pushed out of China because of the suffering, right? And then he moved to Indonesia, where he rebuilt And then he started started building this family that now, is all over the world. And me in Indonesia, and I did not really have a good childhood there because I was born Chinese, and I think I told you about the discrimination against the Chinese and all that. That got me really, really uncomfortable. And so I moved out of the country, and now here I am. So think about the growth that happened there, right? That kind of that's reflected from how we've been moving around and what we've become. So if that answers the question.
It does. So, which kind of leads to my next one. And can you share some more about the traditional Chinese culture and that your grandfather observed and how it impacted your upbringing?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I think I could start, I guess, with what bothered me at first, and a bit at that time I didn't really know because growing up, I just thought that the tradition was just like a way of life. That's how things were supposed to be, and I didn't know better, right? And then as I grew a little older, my mom told me about how my grandfather didn't give his inheritance to the girls, and the girls were not allowed to go to college because they would be married off anyway. What would you need the inheritance for, right? And then there was like all of this talks about, well, being a woman, being a girl, you should not be studying anything too hard because if men find you too smart, you would not be marriageable. Basically, right? And then there's this expectations, right, of what a woman should be. The tradition is, if a woman is being married off to the family, their life is really depending on the mercy of the mother-in-law. If they have a good mother-in-law, then oh, good, they'll have a good life. If they have a mean mother-in-law, oh, that's too bad. But oh well, you just got to suck it up. Yeah. And so that was pretty much like my mother was in a victim mode for a long time because the way that she was brought up, and she wasn't happy, being married to my father. And from her stories, it really seemed like her mother-in-law, my paternal grandmother, was not nice to her. But she would just say, "Oh, it's just my fate." That was it was reflective of how she grew up. And yeah, like all these expectations of although you are maybe say life is supposed to be hard, right? Especially for women, because and the expectation is for them to have children and for them to be a homemaker, and they're supposed to be married. And this is what my mom taught me, because there was a point in my life was like, because my parents had this very toxic relationship. And then I thought, what's the point of getting married, right? And then my mom told me, well, you really have no value as a woman if you're not a wife and a mother. That was what was nailed into me, and
Wow.
so that's the culture, and so if you're not married by the time like my mom would at that point when I think I was like 25, and she would start comparing me to her friends' daughters who got married at the age of 19, or it was like, well, your aunt got married a little young when she was a little younger than you, and all that, right? And so there was this pressure of me of meeting the expectations, which later then made me make decisions. I mean, I won't say wrong, but that were not aligned with who I am, with who I was, at that time. But hey, you know what? Like I said, sometimes there's all of these aspects of life. Well, I think it's just life that happens, whether or not you like it, that puts you in a certain direction, and that's your life, and that's where you find yourself. And I'm grateful for all of that,
You should be.
Yeah, but that's for women, that's what the Chinese tradition is like. And other than that, I mean, okay, for the male, yeah, I think there is always this, of course, constant pressure that they're supposed to provide for the family, right? And that wives are supposed to be obedient to their husbands. And women, when I was growing up, were not supposed to talk back to the parents or anybody elderly. Although you know that they're wrong, you can't point out that they're wrong, because that would cause them to lose face, and then you'd be punished for that, for causing them shame, right? And then when you leave the parents' house, you can only leave your parents' house if you're married. That kind of obedience, that kind of respect, well, I would say fear, is you're continuing that kind of reverence towards your husband and your mother-in-law. So it's like they're trained to be submissive all the time, all their lives, which is really interesting.
So basically, you were raised as a child to be seen and not heard.
That's a really good point. Yes, that is correct.
Gotcha.
That didn't work. And I guess that's why I was punished so much. And that's why life was very traumatizing growing up, because that just didn't work with me, But I did have my own way of coping with it. But that's like a completely different conversation.
So it sounds like your family from the 20s and probably before then has had this cycle of trauma,
mm-hmm.
and that you're being in this generation, you are starting a brand new cycle and breaking that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's what it is, really. I feel that this generation, maybe in order for us to come to where we are now, all the trauma, all the suffering, maybe it needed to happen. I mean, whether or not it needed to happen, it happened. And now it is our responsibility to heal it, right? And when you heal and recognize and have understanding and compassion for yourself, and identify why the trauma happened, and then that helps your healing process. With, for example, that understanding of my parents raising me the way that they did, full of punishments and a lot of abuse and restriction that caused me to misalign from who I really am. But that was the way that they were raised too, right? And they didn't know better. And so when you hear about part of healing is to forgive, but when you have that understanding, there's really nothing to forgive, because look at where we are now. Look at where I am now, right? Having this life that they dreamed of for themselves. Well, maybe they dreamed of for the next generation, for me. And here I am living it.
So that kind of brings me to my next question. Then you mentioned, as you just mentioned, forgiving and releasing blame, as is an important part of your healing from trauma. Can you elaborate on that and how it has helped you in your personal life? with your journey?
That, well, we could circle back to what you said about earlier.
Like I
Okay,
said,
on
if this has been
forgiveness
covered,
cycle.
yeah, okay.
Breaking the cycle. And so by doing that, you are breaking the cycle, right? Because all the wounds that's been carried and passed down to me, because I decided to heal it. Now I have my own child. There's the next generation. You know, if I hadn't healed, if I was not aware of it, if I wasn't conscious of, the forgiveness and whatever wounds and whatever trauma that happened, if I hadn't acknowledged that, I would have just passed it down. I would have just
Right.
passed down the trauma to my child. But because I am in constant process of healing, I'm always aware when I have my triggers, right? All right, so this happened because of years of negative conditioning, and I need to stop it right here and take a breath. This is a part of me that I need to heal, but I need to stop myself from, say, doing something that I would regret, right? When in the interaction with my son, because it's that self-awareness that's been helping me with reevaluating my own, say, I catch myself. It's easier to catch myself when I'm being reactive, when I'm triggered, rather than just keep on going with the reaction. I would more likely to just take time and step back and let me just, all right, think about this thing that I am about to say that I might regret. Then, okay, when I have that awareness, I can give myself compassion. Then the energy changed. And when I do that often enough, that is healing. You know what I mean? And so, and I hope I don't interact in a way that is authoritative, like the way that I was raised. And I am able to interact with my son in a more loving way, in a more fun and just open and being myself, rather than having this authority kind of air to me, which is how I grew up with my parents and my aunts and other relatives. And that's kind of how I changed things. And that way I'm creating a more positive environment for my son to be, to grow up in, and he can be himself a little more, and he can be so much more creative when he feels free to be himself.
Oh, absolutely. So, is it safe to say then all these experiences that from your grandfather to now has led to your desire to be a health coach or to be a life coach to help people change and make them uh, resilient and adapt and inspiring?
Yeah, I would say that has to be the inspiration, right? Because of my observation of the environment that I grew up in, and the way I was raised, and the way that I had to respond to things. It was all really just full of misery. It was all miserable, full of
That's not good.
fear. No, it was an environment that was stressful and full of anxiety. And so for so many years, I was living in, suppression and a lot of anxiety and fear. Even if I try to, deny that, but it reflected in the way I react towards stress and the way that I made decisions, picking jobs that I hated and staying in a marriage that I wasn't happy in, just so I could please people because that's what I was programmed to do, right? But then all those decisions are just bringing me misery, and it just snowballed up, to a point where, okay, I became a mother, and I fell into depression, and my world just crumbled, and my relationships with everyone were destroyed pretty much, and including with my ex-husband, and that's why we got a divorce. And I moved out, then realized that, wow, I was so miserable. I was so unhappy. Right? And that became my comfort zone. That became the misery, although no matter how uncomfortable that was, that because I was so used to it for years, and my nervous system was so dysregulated, and that became my way of life, right? And so at one point, one morning, when I woke up too early to a job that I, of course, hated, um, but I was already awake anyway. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do here, right? Okay, this morning is such a drag, and I feel so miserable and heavy. I think there was a question. It's like, okay, what can I do that's different, because I'm already awake and it's too early anyway. And so I thought, maybe play some music. But then, because a part of me that is so used to, big part of me that was so used to being miserable and heavy energy in the morning, and I hated the morning, right? There was resistance to even turn on the music.
Well,
I was like, ugh, play the music. No, it's like a part of me just got comfortable in that misery, right? It's like, play the music. No, it's like that. But then I turned it on anyway. So it played, and okay, this is kind of nice, different air, different energy now to, to this morning, that was dark that time. And then maybe I should dance to it. But then there's a part of my mind that was resisting that. Like, are you crazy? Why would you dance in the morning? Right? And it resisted, like, literally. And I had
yeah,
to
but
Mhm.
and I'm sorry for interrupting. And I guess what people don't realize is as you mentioned, those morning routines or your music, you can change your emotion in a heartbeat.
Exactly. That was what really happened. So, although I resisted, I moved anyway. And just 2 minutes of dancing to some fun music, it changed my emotion. And so the mood that was like heavy and down and low, it just got uplifted. And so I would go to work in a different mood. And the kind of job that I was also teaching that time. The way I did my work, just like a lot of people on the hamster wheel, tell the kids to do their work, take the grades, take my paycheck, go home, like that kind of life, right?
Right.
And because I was happier after all the dance and the music, I came to school, and I actually interacted with the students like they're human, you know, which
Right.
was something I did not do before. And everything became more human and more loving. And so, noticing how that changed my mood and how I interacted, I felt, okay, maybe there's something to this. And the next morning, I would do that again. I would dance to maybe 2 songs, and then a couple of songs the next morning. And I decided, okay, maybe I should just wake up a little earlier, just 10 minutes, right? Just so I could have some fun and give myself that happiness and generate that joyful emotion. And so that's what I did. 10 minutes became 15 minutes, and became 20 minutes and half an hour, right? And then 2 hours now, because happiness is addictive, right? But there's also the kind of happiness that you realize you have the power to create yourself, not depending it on substance or romantic relationships or sex or, shopping, which, I did all those things, like, having those addictions, right? Like, because I was so unhappy. But that was also empowering for me to realize that when I nourish myself emotionally first thing in the morning, a couple of things happen there, because my body is so used to the joyful emotion, to the happiness. It's healing my cells, it's healing my nervous system. Because for a lot of people, it's so easy, right, to react to the news, road rage, or
Yeah,
complaints all the time, and being in this
absolutely.
victim place. But then when you realize that you can be happy right here at this moment by choosing whatever you want to do, whatever you want to think, right? Because I did all these happy activities. It caused happy emotions that made me think happy thoughts. And then throughout the day, that's how I deal with things from that state of happiness. And so I perform my job from a state of happiness, right? I interact with my students, with my colleagues from the state of having been nourished and taken care of. And that reconditioned my body, reconditioned my mind. That made me a happier person, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. So you call yourself a habits coach.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, you're not a manifestation coach because
No.
I've seen those. But if you change, technically, you could be a manifestation coach that provides emotional happiness and well-being.
That is really interesting. I've never thought of that. So now I've just been sticking with habits coach because you know what? Happiness is a habit. In order for you to be miserable, you can adopt miserable thoughts, right? Miserable actions. And the same thing with happiness. And why would I choose miserable anyway, right? Like I choose happy, and that's why I choose happy actions and keep on doing it on a consistent basis. And happiness thoughts that are happy on a consistent basis. I can't talk today, but hypothetically speaking, on your point about manifestation, you manifest, like we manifest all the time, right? When you put out and you manifest whatever energy that is around you, whatever is in your energy field, when what is in your energy field is the emotion of happiness, the emotion of calm and peace, then what is attracted to your field are happy experiences, happy things, peaceful people, happy people, right? And all kinds of experiences and material, right? So I guess it can be related, that way. But I find that it makes more sense for people when I'm talking about habits and make that relationship with their psychology. And I think that way they can relate it, with that a little more rather than, then you manifest all these things. And because for a lot of people, that's still kind of like woo woo. And for some people, it doesn't really make sense, which I understand, but I do believe it. Right. But then I also believe that everything around us is energy. And if I want to materialize happy, loving experiences and materials around me, it needs to start from my energy. I need to turn my energy to be happy and loving one so that I would attract those positive experiences.
Gotcha. Very well said. I like that. Now we have about 12 minutes left. So I have one last question. So lastly, what advice would you give to others who may be struggling with generational trauma and trying to heal from it?
Wow. Yeah, I guess it really varies, right? The kind of trauma, and it's unique for everyone. But the way that I did it, and I can only speak for myself, is that that not idea, the fact that each of us has a choice whether to use the trauma as a way to weigh us down and, and cause you misery all the time. Because, yeah, of course, in order for you to understand happiness, you need to know sadness, right? In order for you to understand light, you need to know dark. And so, yes, so you have the choice whether to see that, to see the trauma as a tool for you to desire the opposite of it. Because I would see bad experiences or trauma are actually an invitation to get to the other side. And so, at least for me, what happened back then, right? The life of punishment, constant misery and anxiety. That was an invitation for me to visualize, to envision a life that is the total opposite of that. And little by little, I walked through the path that helped me create a life that is the opposite of that life of misery. And now I'm in a world where I am free, and I learned to be free. I learned to be happy. I learned how to be myself. But that's where I am now, is what the trauma and the bad experiences, where it catapulted me to, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, if you're looking to make changes in your life and you need a habits coach, please take down Jenny's info that's scrolling across the screen. And Jenny, please feel free to add anything, that links, or I know I have some links that are crossing the screen, but anything else you'd like to add?
At this point, not really much, but please get connected with me through Instagram or Facebook. I would be happy to speak with you. And something about my work that I really love is connecting with new people. Right? That's how we met, right, Jeff? And pretty much.
That is correct.
Yes. And this is such a big world, and there's so many aspects of this life there is to enjoy. But if we are so stuck in a certain way, in a certain habit, that, yeah, a lot of us probably find our habits are kind of old and okay, what's new? Then what you need to do is really to step out of that hamster wheel,
right,
and pick a new spot to hang out in, and start rebuild something. And it starts with a habit. Starts with building something happy for yourself. And like I said earlier, happiness is habit. If you wanted to be happier, then you need to start up a new habit. Starting small, starting easy, be kind and compassionate to yourself in the process. And if you'd like to talk with me more about that, and if you'd like to even speak to me on how to start a morning habit, even if you tell yourself that you're not a morning person, I could tell you how to do it easy. So I give a 30-minute free coaching. And I'll probably send that link to you too. So, somebody if somebody's interested in talking about how to do that with me, I would be so happy in connecting with you. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me here and having me talk to your community.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been really informative, very inspiring. And for those of you who don't know, I also own My Digital Memories, where we preserve the past and inspire the future, very much like this podcast does. So if you want to be a guest, please reach out to me at jeff@mydigital-memories.com or visit our website at www.mydigital-memories.com. And that's about a wrap. So I appreciate everybody listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call at 703-861-2793, or feel free to call Jenny at your number is what, 860?
208-2535.
Perfect. And which is also scrolling across the screen now that I see it. So thank you very much. And we do have upcoming episodes on people who deal with trauma. So you might want to stay tuned because those are guaranteed to be very interesting. So hope everybody has a great week, and we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.